Hello, welcome back to I Got Board Game. I am
Woo.
Ben.
I'm John.
I got board
I
game.
got board game.
And today's video is very special. This
And it's
is
Friday.
what?
It's Friday.
And it's Friday. That's always great. You're probably seeing this later than Friday,
On
but
Saturday.
for us, this is a great Friday. Because of this special video, we have spent quite a bit of time preparing, me more so.
I'm pretty sure I'm pointing the right way.
Yeah, I see you pointing at me. Hope that's right. Because today we are doing our first ever top 10 video. Top 10. And so this is exciting
when
because
I'm supposed to 10. 10.
Countdown, it's starting. Because I mean, this is exciting because, you know, it's something that we've talked about before. And of course, people who watch other board game channels are used to seeing these kind of things, top 10 lists for all different things, all different kinds of games, genres, situations. I mean, Dice Tower has probably the most top 10s I've come across. And they've gotten into some weird ones over the more recent years after they did all those other ideas of, like, you know, they ended up doing stuff like top 10 kinds of people you like gaming with or something like that. They're fun to watch though. I really like watching them. But this is our first top 10. And we are in the new year. Happy New Year.
Woo.
And so with that, we are actually doing a top 10 list of the top 10 games we played last year. Top 10 games we played in 2020. And so a few caveats we need to kind of just say in the beginning. One, it's not a list. This is not a list of top 10 games of 2020. The chances of us playing that many games that came out in 2020 are very low.
United States and COVID.
So this is not top 10 2020 games. But this is games we got to play in 2020. However limited, however limited that was, it was very limited. But still, among all the games we played, not even together, just like separately too, we ranked the top 10 that we enjoyed or would recommend. Or actually, we'll go into a little bit of how we actually did this. But other caveat is that we did separate lists. John and I did separate lists, so and we haven't shared our lists with each other, so we don't know what games are going to come up. There might be crossover or games on both of our lists at different positions, or even same numbers. That'd be pretty crazy.
Unlikely.
Yeah, John has terrible taste in games. So
no, Ben just doesn't play good games. That's all.
So yeah, we don't know each other's list, but this is going to be both of our top 10. So not a combined single top 10. You guys are getting basically two top 10s.
You're getting two top 10 lists. Listeners, two for the price of one.
It's like you can maybe even call it a top 20 because my top 10 are better than John. So it'll be his 10 and then my 10.
Reverse that and then it's accurate. 100%.
So I think those are the caveats I wanted to put out there. You can remind me if I'm forgetting something, but kind of going on a little bit, we also want to kind of give you guys a sense of how we did our top 10 lists. And so we both used this website, let me see, called rankingengine.meeplepub.com. It was one I shared with John, and it was one that I came across a long time ago from one of those other YouTube channels. I think maybe the Game Boy Geek or someone just mentioned it once, and I decided to save that, bookmark that, so I could use it one day. And so,
and now it's used.
Now it's used, and it was helpful. I thought it was helpful. It does sound like the system that some people do manually, but it's basically a website that lets you look up games from Board Game Geek or even type in game name that you know. And it kind of, you prepare a list first, and then you choose to rank it, where then it'll show you like two games out of your list, and you basically have to choose which one do you like more, and it'll just keep doing those kind of pairings until your whole list is in ranked order. And so yeah, that's what we both did. But then of course there could be differences in how John and I did that process too. Even though we use the same website, I was kind of saying before we started recording that, maybe our thinking could have been differently. When the website shows you 2 games from your list, maybe you were thinking like, is it which game I would want to play more right now? Or is it which game you think in the long term or in a more objective way is just a better game? Or a game that you think more people would like over the other one? And so I don't know, how did you go about using that, John?
I clicked, and whatever I clicked, it's just truth. That's all it is.
You kept clicking on the left game, whatever it was.
Exactly. No. I think for me, I was thinking of being a top 10 list of games I played this year. I would say I had kind of 2 factors as I thought about each of the games as they were being paired. Is it a game I'm willing to replay right now again? And is it a game that I think is a good game, like a genuinely good game to play, right? And there's a lot of the games that you'll see on my list that are ones that we've done reviews on in the past. So chances are, you may see some of these in the top 10 list of mine. But that's kind of the criteria I went by, because given that the limitation is didn't have a lot of access to play a lot of board games, to people that maybe I would normally play with, it was a little more limited than I would have expected. And we've done rankings, right, with the board game rating, like our own personal ratings. So if you're interested in how we think, I think from that sense is more of an objective perspective, given that those are the reviews that we're doing of the game in itself. That's the kind of way, because I also did not spend hours upon hours deciding my top 10 of games.
I was telling John, I spent maybe I spent at least 2 hours putting together my list, but also doing a little research to give you guys a little more information with each of my games. And so it was kind of playing around with the website, that ranking engine. I even ran that engine twice. It didn't take that long, but twice, to make sure I was like consistent in my thinking and ranking.
Overachiever.
Good quality for you guys.
Overachiever.
And actually, John, did you include games you played on like Tabletop Simulator?
That's pretty much most of the games.
Okay.
Because there's a few that didn't, but again, I have been following my quarantine very well. Thank you very much. So I have not had physical access with enough people to play board games with in person.
I think because I log all my plays on Board Game Geek, right? And so when I was looking through it, I did notice like at the beginning of the year, like the first couple months, there was like a handful of games I played. And so maybe some of those made it on my list, but then majority I played like with my relatives the last maybe 2 weeks over, Christmas break and stuff. That's when I played like 20 different games. And so that's obviously when I got most of my gaming in. So probably more of the games are from there too. But I did, just wanted to ask that, point that out. I don't think I've played that much on Tabletop Simulator, but maybe something from it does show up on my list. Or even actually, maybe even solo games that I played on my own just because I was that interested.
Or that bored. Just kidding.
So I think
I have one or two that do that too. So
so I think with that should be everything to give you guys an idea of how we prepared this. And so we will begin our top 10 games we played in 2020 with number 10.
10.
Number 10. So starting number 10, I will go first. My number 10 game that I played in 2020. Got to make sure to say that the right way.
Drum
roll. Is Time Stories Estrella Drive.
You played without me?
No, I played it with you. Right. What are you talking about? That was
I was like, you played without me, you cheater. Right. We played this at the beginning of the year.
It's like, how do you have a memory of playing it and think I played it without you?
Well, now we know my list is totally garbage because I forgot we played that this last year.
You forgot you played it, huh?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so Time Stories Astrea Drive, and I'm including this because though it's technically an expansion, it is, I mean, its own story, you know. So I counted it as its own, kind of judging just that kind of experience, but then roughly in the Time Story system, right? And so, like I mentioned, yeah, this is an expansion scenario to Time Stories, one of the later ones, and I'm not going to spoil anything about it, though there is this mature audience only warning. But John and I played this, and it was
Not
just,
mature.
it wasn't like the most memorable story, especially when I was ranking, you know, and this would come up versus another game. I'd be like, I don't remember all the story points we came across in this, but I remember at the end very clearly that we were both like, that wasn't that bad as we thought, like from reviews we might have heard before. And I think it was surprising because it was probably because we had such a long break from playing Time Stories, where maybe reviews that I had heard, you know, is people who just kept playing them as they came out. And then they were, you know, continually comparing each scenario to each other, like this one did this better, this one didn't. Where then this, I mean, we obviously had the previous experiences, but because we hadn't been in that world playing that story system in so long, it was refreshing, I think, to go back to a game like that. And so I didn't think it was that bad. There were maybe just a few things I actually remember from it. So that's why I think it's number 10 for me. It was like, it was a good to return to it as something that was very different, nice to get back to, but I wouldn't like think it was that amazing overall.
Cool.
So that's my number 10. Time Stories Astrea Drive.
Nice. So my number 10 is drum roll. Similar.
Similar.
So this is I think I don't know if we talked about it yet on the videos, but basically this is a kind of light game. Basically what happens is you have a clue giver who is, it's a cooperative game where there's a clue giver who basically is looking at a set of, I believe, 12 cards for a tableau, and then one of those cards is a secret identity that they need their teammates to kind of deduce is the person that is the secret identity. And basically what happens is there's a tableau that's spread out, and over the course of the game, that clue giver can't speak and they can't communicate with the players other than using a clue separate cards from a deck, from the rest of the deck, that will give clues to the other players whether or not the clue that they give is similar or similar to the idea to the character, or unsimilar, dissimilar, non-similar to that. And basically it runs over the course of 5 rounds, where for most of the rounds you're progressively removing more and more cards from the tableau until you don't. So this was an interesting one because we actually did a video experimentation gameplay that Ben was running for us, where he had the game and a number of us were on video call. And basically we were watching his screen as he would share the clue cards to us, and we would discuss with each other on the Zoom call to decide. So it was a pretty fun experience. It's a fun game. It's very light. Again, it's kind of pseudo party in the sense of cooperative, and it's very light. It's not expecting to be a long-term or heavy game, but it runs kind of that vein of code names, right? But again, fully cooperative, where everyone's working together. And that it is also, the other cool thing about it is, as you can see in the background, is there are 3 different sets that are out, and you can actually play with a combination of one set to another set in the game. Like your tableau of guesses are from one group, and then the person's giving clues from another kind of deck entirely. So you can kind of mishmatch it that way. So that is my number 10.
And so Similo is, we did review that more recently. So if you're interested, you can find our review on that. And Similo was one that I was considering quite a bit. It just maybe didn't make it. We don't know yet.
Weak.
But, you know, there were other games, like I mentioned, from like the earlier beginning of the year that I forgot I had played. And then going back to those were obviously contenders. So, okay, so those are our number 10. Time Stories, Australia Drive, and Similo. Number 9.
No.
Okay, John, you first. What's your number 9?
All right. So for me, my number 9 game was Sheriff. Oh, this does not come out very well. I should have gotten a better picture, but it is Sheriff of Nottingham. I think Ben probably has the game. You don't need to grab it. Basically,
it's right there.
Oh, it's right there in his little corner. Basically, this is a deception game. Basically, what you're doing is you're playing as merchants that are trying to bring in goods to the town of Nottingham, in which the sheriff is determining whether or not you are bringing in, proper good, properly kind of identified and counted goods into the good town of Nottingham, or if you're a filthy black market dealer who's trying to bring in more than they're supposed to bring in, or bringing in illegal goods into the city. Contrabands. And basically what you're doing is basically trying to smuggle in these goods to try to make the most money at the end of the game, right? So there's 4 licit goods or legal goods that you can bring into the town, and there's a bunch of illegal goods that you can also bring, but it's also a matter of trying to bring in also being able to say the proper trying to convince the sheriff to let you bring in goods that may not be the goods that you actually declared. So there's a lot of deception involved with this game, and there is an actual really fun physical component to the game of the fact that you have these pouches that you need to put the card goods into, and when you close them, they're considered, you can't like rechange it or do anything. You give it to the sheriff, and then you have to tell the sheriff a certain, I think you have to tell them the exact number and of a certain type of goods that's being brought in. Whether those cards are those or not is an entirely different matter, but that's basically the whole game. So it's a very fun game. It runs 2 rounds, I think, where everyone gets to be the sheriff twice, and you're just trying to make the most money by the end of it, and whoever has the most money wins. So very fun game.
Yeah,
I played it I think right before, or like I had played it with some friends, Chase and some of the buddies that are friends of ours before the pandemic hit. So it was fun to play.
Yeah, Sheriff is great. People. Dice Tower essential game. One of the early ones. And so my number 9 is 5-Minute Mystery, which you guys maybe saw me do an unboxing of on the channel, and I finally got to play it with my relatives not too long ago, and it was great. I think it is better than 5-Minute Dungeon, which we reviewed on our channel, where 5-Minute Dungeon was obviously the first one starting this line of games, where that one was kind of, you're going through a dungeon cooperatively, basically playing cards to match symbols within the 5-minute time limit, where this one actually is about deducing something within certain time limits, not actually always 5 minutes. It depends on the scenario you play, but the mechanisms just work well together. And I remember even my uncle, who we got to play it with, we ran one round where it basically has like this like decoder toy inside, and then all of you are cooperatively looking at like a room card, like in the museum. And in that card, it's like a nice artwork of some section of the museum that the story takes place in. And you're trying to identify like symbols that are kind of hidden, like different kinds of triangle shapes, circle configurations, different symbols. And you have to tell the person with the decoder to rotate it to that symbol. And then after you found all 5, you have to compare it to the back of the card to see if you got all the symbols correct. And if you do, then you get to randomly draw some kind of evidence, basically token. And then the tokens have this cool mechanism where it has like a barcode on the side of the item. And you're supposed to match that up with your suspect tile, which is like face down, but you match it up to the side of it to see if the barcode matches. And if it does, then you know that suspect has that evidence or that item. And it's a cool little mechanic. And I remember just running through that first game, and my uncle was like, it's like magic that it works out. like that you can just match these pieces, and then through your cards of suspects, you're kind of eliminating like, oh, okay, the suspect has a scarf, so it can't be these people. And you kind of process of elimination that way, and then it works out. Then you flip over the tile when you think you know who it is, and it worked out, and it's like, it's magic. So I am impressed by how it actually works out. That well. And it looks nice.
Good.
So 5-minute mystery. And so that was our number 9.
Woo!
Similo from John, and 5-minute mystery from me. So going on to number
mystery
8.
Box.
Number 8.
Which is not my game. Mystery ball.
So my number 8 of games that I got to play in 2020 is one that we reviewed, The Crew. The Crew. The Search for Planet 9. So The Crew, this small box game. And if you guys can't tell, I probably have all the games I'll be putting on my list, so I'm just going to be showing it this way. The Crew is one that I first played on Tabletop Simulator with John and Peter. And that was before I could get a copy of it. And then I got a copy and got to play with my relatives. And obviously plays the same, and it's still great. Just the puzzle of cooperatively winning tricks in a certain order.
How far did you guys get?
Basically what it is. And we have a review of it, like I mentioned. So if you're interested, you can find that. But I do find the puzzle nature of it even more interesting of a puzzle than like 5-minute mystery. It's definitely more thinking than just kind of speed deduction. It's actually trying to figure out how to communicate with the limited communication we have, and then to fulfill the increasing difficulty with the missions or the scenarios you're playing through, which do actually get trickier and trickier, which is surprising. I mean, I've never gotten too far, maybe like the first 10 missions at most, but there's 50 missions you can play, so that's impressive too. But this game, I do want to mention, with some of the games, like I did some more research to maybe give you guys a better sense of how well it did. And so The Crew was the winner of the Kennerspiel des Jahres, the basically Gamer Game of the Year award. And then for the Golden Geek Awards, it won the 2019 Golden Geek winner for co-op games, and then was nominated for being the most innovative, even Game of the Year, best family game, best card game. So it probably has more than those, but those are kind of the awards I'd made note of, the Golden Geeks and the Game of the Year or Spiel des Jahres awards. So The Crew has done very well. That's my number 9. Number 8. Sorry.
8. It's literally 8. On the page, man. No.
Yeah, you showed it. Number 8. You know what? It's probably because the title has Quest for Planet 9. Anyways.
It should have been your number 9. Then.
My number 8. The Crew.
Nice. Cool. So my number 8 is Steampunk Rally.
Oh, nice.
So it's an older game, but I actually got to play this on Tabletop Simulator with some of my siblings and cousins. Basically, this game is you play as a number of these inventors. So Einstein, Madame Curie, Tesla. There's like all these different kind of, various inventors and kind of, engineers and creators in the last, 1500, like from the 1500s and so forth kind of time frame. And basically what they're doing is they're creating these giant racing contraptions that you're basically doing this race to try to get from the start line to the finish. And the fun thing about this game is it's a literal engine building game, but it's not an actual engine builder like we've talked about in our Wingspan review. But what you're doing is, as you're going through the course and the race, you're using various kind of dice, which are your fuel, 3 different colored fuels that will be powered through your machine, and you're trying to get there as fast as possible compared to your opponents. But the catch is that because they're basically building these things on the fly and on the go, your contraption can take damage and can blow up on you as you're going through the race. So it's this combination of trying to put on more components to your machine to go faster, but at the same time not accruing too much damage as you're going through the track, because if your contraption explodes, you end up behind the last player in the race. So you get reset to that space. So it's really fun. There's a lot of, interactions between players because everyone's kind of getting these cards at the, like, drafting cards and getting these cards throughout the course of the game. And then you can also kind of sabotage each other's machines by shooting giant lasers or missiles at each other, or dropping an oil slick behind you that deals damage to other players, so on and so forth. So we played it a long time ago ourselves, and then I think it was kind of nice playing it on the online forum because there's a lot of components and pieces to the game that were a lot easier to handle when we were using it on the tabletop simulator versus in person, where you kind of need a lot of space to put all the cards out, but in tabletop you kind of have effectively unlimited space, or a lot of space to kind of play around with. So it was fun. So in my top 8, or is my top 8.
And so actually something I do want to mention here is some other details, if I remember it or if it comes to mind while we're sharing these games. For example, Steampunk Rally is put out by Roxley Games, which has done actually a few other really amazing games that I've also played over the years, like Santorini and Brass Birmingham.
Did they make Camelot, or is that a different?
That's a different one.
Oh, never mind.
I'm trying to look.
Is that on your list
that's
of what you're going to show? No.
where then the crew, like in our review, is mentioned that it's by Cosmos, which has been around for a long time and also known for their like 2-player line of games too. So just other details to fill you guys in on some of these. For example, one small thing also, for John's choices so far, Steampunk Rally came out in 2015. These are all years that I actually just looked it up while you're talking to help add this detail for you.
Yep.
Based off the years on Board Game Geek, which can be wrong though, but at least that's what I'll let you know. According to Board Game Geek, Steampunk Rally came out 2015. Your number 9, Sheriff of Nottingham, came out in 2014. And Similo came out, it says 2019, but I believe it should be 2020. At least that's when it is available to us here. And then for my games, because I actually did write it down as part of my research, my Time Stories number 10 came out in 2017. 5 Minute Mystery came out last year, a 2020 game. And The Crew was technically 2019, but again, maybe was available to us in 2020. So yeah, just letting you guys know. I'll try to include those dates, those years, so that you guys just have more information on these games. I mean, I find it interesting is like how some of these older games are on our list, like how many years ago, like Sheriff of Nottingham, 6 years, but it's still a great game. Well, 7 years technically now.
It feels like it was actually older than that, but it's just that it's almost like, to me, I think of Sheriff as that time of the classic kind of like starter of, the board game revolution kind of, let's say. So Sheriff of Nottingham for some reason sticks in my mind as one of those, but it's not quite that old, but it isn't super recent either. So yeah. But anyway.
So going on to number
7. Lucky number 7.
Is that the one? That's not the 7 Wonder 7, is it?
I don't know. I have no idea.
It looks like it could be like
a lot of these are just online on the stock photos. I try not to do too many stocks, but
don't tell them our secrets. Yes,
Cat's
number 7. Number 7, starting with
my time. So my number 7 is Twilight Imperium 4th edition. You thought it might be higher, huh? It's not. Only at 7.
No, I mean, it's just always surprising to see it on a list.
See it on lists. Yeah. It's such a good game. But so Twilight Imperium is a very heavy game. Basically, the nature of the game is I forget what the race is, but they're looking to set up the new kind of ruler of the imperial, like, of the cosmos, effectively, right? Who is going to be taking over the seat of political power to rule the galaxies, right? And so basically, what you do is you play as one of the unique factions in the game, and you're basically vying to gain political supremacy, or you're trying to vie for supremacy to show that you are the next leaders and rulers of the universe. Um, and so basically, it's actually so it sounds super grand like that. You could distill it as it's a Euro game in the sense that you're collecting points. That's really how you win the game. If you want to be that, boring about it. But it's actually a super complicated game because there's a lot of actions and decisions that you have to make throughout the game because you are controlling your player, and you basically are like, the players are selecting kind of the order, the turns that are happening within a round at the beginning of each round. And you have a certain amount of command tokens that allow you to do certain actions or to take certain, to take certain effects to happen. And the players who select the turn to happen get special bonuses for doing it, but other players can use certain resources to gain advantage to try to use the same or similar actions within that turn. And so basically the game runs over a course and series of a number of rounds until you effectively get to the end of one player having, dominance over everybody else because they had a superior fleet, or they knew how to politic better, or they were, trade Mongols or whatever and whatnot. And so I think that's kind of the essence of the game. And I think one of the really cool aspects is the fact that every faction in this game is unique, and they all have very unique and varied powers. Whether they're balanced or not is a question that you can look up in the forums, because those things exist for this game, that this is such a popular game for heavy board gamers, that there is kind of this continuous following and people that create actual like tournaments and systems online of how to play against other people, how to play each other, and kind of keep track of records of strategies and things like that through this game, because it's so complex. There's so many options and variations that can happen in the course of the game that is why. So we played it just once, I think, over this last year, but it's a very notable game. It's one that I am willing to play again. I think the reason why I didn't put it higher is, as I kind of just mentioned,
he lost that game he played.
I did lose, but it's a very heavy game. And so, as I said, my two criteria is it a really good game? And is it one I'm willing to pick up again? So while the answer is yes to both, it is very heavy. So it's also really hard to find players who are willing to play. And it's also a time commitment. It's on average, I believe these games last between 2 to 4 hours on average, right? Something like that. So
only
it's not easy to just say, I'm going to jump into this game to play this game, right? Like, you're going to be spending a lot of time in this game, which is why I think for me, that's why it's not going to be ranked higher in comparison to other games that are going to show up in my list.
I mean, yeah, not
Imperium 4?
Not
fourth edition. So there are other editions actually that exist out there. So just be aware that right now they're in the 4th edition of the game.
Yeah, not to detract people from it, but it is a heavy game. You saying 2 to 4 hours sounds a little short. Just a little. I'm pretty sure the box says either 2 to 4 or 3 to 6.
I mean, we took effectively.
Yeah, but we were
4
3
hours
players.
when we did our playthrough.
We were 3 players though.
Yeah, with 3 players. Yeah, if you're playing with like a full set of 6 people, I think, then it is going to be a lot longer, because the more people you add into a game where you have to discuss, it just gets longer.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah,
as you can see in our videos here, there's like 2 of us, and how long do these videos go?
There's that kind of like politics with it going on. Like, it's a huge space game, exploration, expansion, conquering. It is the kind of game that at conventions, it's the game that's known as being like, people set it up, play it for like a day, and then leave it and come back to continue playing the game. Like, people really get into it. And I think it was funny when I first learned about the game, it was like, well, how is it so long? Because you're just trying to get to 10 points first. It's like, what? We're only playing to 10 points?
Yep.
But no, it's great. I mean, I don't have an issue with the game, except for, how you're saying it might be hard to get people to play it, but because it's such a time investment. But yeah, it's great. It's published by Fantasy Flight Games, huge in the industry, and I believe some of the background. Maybe a couple years ago, Shut Up and Sit Down, a different YouTube channel, did like a funny kind of documentary with real facts though, but it's just their humor with it of the history of Twilight Imperium. And I think from what I remember, it's like the game that either launched or like saved Fantasy Flight Games in the beginning. And so it's really special to that company. Even though the company's gone off to do a lot of big IP games over the years, they're really huge. Twilight Imperium is special to them. 4th edition came out, according to Board Game Geek, in 2017, which sounds about right. I think that's when I got it. But then before that, 3rd edition was very popular, which came out in 2005, apparently. And then before that, 2nd and 1st edition were like 2000 and 1997. It's like, dang, this game has been around.
But it's a good one.
Yeah. And so you're number 7, Twilight Imperium 4th edition. So my number 7 game that came out in 2019, technically, I think, again, it was only widely available in 2020. QE. Money, 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 money. Okay. So QE, this size box, is a game that's basically set in during the economic crash of 2008, and you're all playing as countries, nations, buying companies at that time. And basically the most interesting mechanism in this game is that it is a bidding or auction kind of game, but it's not like you're going back and forth increasing how much you're paying, but it's I guess it's called a secret bidding or hidden bidding, where you're just writing a price down and then the auctioneer kind of goes with the highest price and that person wins whatever company, which is worth points. But the whole idea is that while you're bidding simultaneously, you can write any amount of money you want. And that's kind of the interesting gimmick to the game, which makes it so interesting, because then the players are all kind of setting the rate of the game, right? How much the amount of money you're playing at. Well, then obviously you can kind of get screwed up by you putting a super high number, and other people just put like $5, because the person who has who spent the most money at the end of the game automatically loses, is out of the game. But I think part of it is there is that kind of thinking then of like, oh, if I know this person's willing to spend that much, maybe I could spend close to that much and see what happens, and kind of that mind game of trying to see where everyone is willing to spend, because you can just make up the amount you want to spend. You don't actually have to have that money in the game. And so it was fun. And what was most surprising about it, I already knew about that mechanic to the game when I heard a review of it a while back. But when I actually got to play it with my relatives, it was surprising how fast it went. Like I thought for some reason, I just thought it'd be slower because it's a game with money and bidding, but it went really quickly. And then even the player boards have like it's organized really nicely to help you keep track of your points, or basically you flow through with it to calculate your points at the end. So it made that part really simple. So yeah, it was a funny bidding game, and it went much faster than I thought it would. So my number 7, QE.
Nice.
And when so going on.
What did you say when it came out? I forgot.
Oh yeah, 2019 technically.
2019, right? You said that at the beginning.
But I think available to us in 2020 mainly, widely available. Cool. So going on to our number 6. Number 6.
Can I do it?
Am I doing it right? Yeah, there you go.
6.
No. Number 6. Starting with me.
Yep.
My number 6 came out in 2014, an older game, but it was the 2014 Golden Geek nominee for most innovative and best family and card game. I didn't win any of those, but nominated. And this game was kind of a surprise to me this year that I got to play at the end of the year. And that is Paperback. John is excited for this one.
Told you. I've asked to play it a few times.
I actually probably haven't played this since like 2014 or whatever.
Always rejected me.
Yes, I was wrong to not play it all the years.
Told you.
It's my number 6. And no, this was a surprising one to return to, because I think for all those years, like after I first got it, I thought it was interesting because it was one of the first games that started mixing deck building with another genre, right? This is basically deck building Scrabble, right? It's the traditional deck building of starting with, default cards. You draw 5 cards, spend it, add more, shuffle when you need to, and draw 5 more. But it's with letters and words, and basically you're making words with the letters that you have in your hand. And different letters will be worth different points to help you buy different letters, and certain letters have abilities on them if you use them in your words. And the whole idea, the theme too, is kind of cute. Is you're kind of writing novels. You are I think you're helping, or you are Page Turner, and she's writing all these kind of novels, and I think it's a pretty cool theme. But yeah, it works well. I think, yeah, like I mentioned, I haven't played it for so long because I think after I first got it, it was all interesting that it was a mix of something new with deck building. But I think I ran into maybe some rules issue that I wasn't sure about how to understand at the time. Maybe I just inexperienced with games, but certain rules with, like, when you make 2 words, or cards that let you make 2 words, like how do you score those? How do you count the points on those? But that issue didn't come up when I was playing these times recently. So I think maybe I can just forget about that.
You have
And
evolved. You have evolved.
because then aside from that, like, yeah, I mean, that was only just something that would be, a little hindrance of like, maybe something unclean about it, about the design. But no, I mean, playing it these times is great, and just is funny playing with my cousins of like, just you just laugh about words that you make, or like words that you make again because you couldn't think of something new. And
How
just
many times have you spelled that word now?
yeah.
It was like the
Like,
same time, like 6 times.
I think like one of my words or my cousin's words that came up a lot was like learn, or relearn, or learned. And then I remember it's so funny of like trying to spend time, because you get these kind of bonus cards if you can make a word with a certain number of letters. And the first bonus is at 7 letters, and then an 8-letter word, then 9, and so on. And so, like, I would go for those, and I would get like a 7-letter word on a turn and get that bonus. And then the next one is like 8. And I was like, what's with all these 7-letter words? Like, I'm just thinking of all these words and they're all 7 letters. I'm like, what the heck, English language? Why are they all 7 letters?
Race
Yeah.
car.
Race.
And it's a palindrome.
7. Give me
7
8.
letters and a palindrome.
Don't give me race cars.
Race cars.
But yeah, so it is actually better than I remember. Didn't have that rule, didn't run into any rule hiccups. So maybe that's not a real issue and I just didn't understand it. So this is a game that I think if you like word games, want to experience deck building, great way to go about it. Published by Tim Fowers, who's also the designer. And so I think he's released like maybe a handful of games over the years. He's
Burgle Bros, right?
Yeah, Burgle Bros, a sequel to this game called Hardback. Another one about directing airplane flights. So he's done some pretty interesting games, but I think he just doesn't bring much attention to himself. But his games do generally okay, like at least review wise, just maybe doesn't get that much attention. But Paperback is one I would actually recommend and would want to keep playing. More word deck building.
So
Not with John though, he doesn't get to play it. No, just kidding. So Paperback, my number 6.
Nice. So my number 6 is a game you're probably not familiar with, that you've never seen before, ever. The Crew!
Crossover!
So I think stuff has been said already about this when we played it on, Tabletop Simulator. It was a fun experience. I think something that Ben didn't mention, or kind of alluded to, but didn't really speak to, and we've done a review of this game already, is that it's a trick-taking game. And I've always enjoyed a lot of trick-taking games in my past. having it be cooperative and being puzzly just makes it more interesting versus just being a standard trick-taking game where you're playing against other players. So that's mainly the only extra stuff I wanted to add. Fun game. I think there's a lot of variety. There's a lot of options. Playing it with different people means you can redo the scenarios over and over because it's always about kind of learning who you're playing with. And so it's not like a legacy game where it's only one time you play through it and that's it. Like this has replayability even for scenarios you may have already played. So
yeah, I think one of the funny memories with this game when I got to play with my relatives recently was my cousins. I had to go through, like, every time we had to teach our uncle the game, like my cousin's dad, and like it's just interesting because he just never remembers mechanics. Like he's probably played quite a few games with us over the years, but he just doesn't remember the mechanics when I say the certain name, like deck building or even trick taking. Even though, like, while we started playing this game after teaching him, like he like revealed that he played bridge a lot when he was younger or something. And I'm like, so you know how this works. And then he was the one who was like most into it. Like he wanted to keep doing missions. He's like, no, we can figure this out. This is doable. And I'm like, you're the one who didn't even know what trick taking meant. And now you're like the one who probably knows the most out of all of us here. Yeah,
Nice.
The Crew. Again, Kennerspiel, Desjardins winner. So big award for that game. So going on, our number 5.
5. Oh, I dropped something.
That's a nice 5.
It is a nice 5. The other one sucked. I had to change it. Anyway, number 5 for me is a game we've done a review before. Splendor.
Ooh.
I got to play it with my fiance during the winter vacation time. So we just did 2 players, but it was great to get back into Splendor and just play it, just have a nice time with it. You can watch our review about this game, but basically it is a point collection game. But what you're doing is you're effectively these merchants and you're trying to kind of build your trade and by collecting various gems through the gameplay. So it's very simple gameplay. You only have, I think, 3 actions, which is to either gather gems, buy properties, or reserve a card from the property line or the trade line, effectively, I think is what it's officially called. And you're basically just collecting and accruing a lot of these cards to build your tableau until you're able to get the most points and win the game. I believe it's 15 points to trigger the end of the game. So very simple game, but it's a really fun game. I think we had mentioned in the video that maybe the newer editions don't have the clay chips anymore for the gems, but I have one of the original or like the earlier edition sets where it still has the clay chips, like the clay poker chips. So it gives it a really nice feel to as you're kind of collecting these gems and you're holding it in front of you. And then the card artwork is really nice. It's very beautiful artwork. It's a lot of landscapes and different kind of, areas, and the gems look really beautiful, and it's just really great artwork in the game. And it's very simple and it's very quick to get through, but it still has levels of complexity that doesn't, that even if you know the game, there's still a lot of things you can master in playing the game too. So it's just great game, lots of stuff. Ben will tell you the details because I didn't do any research, so he'll tell you all the other fun stuff.
I mean, the feeling again of just like buying and be able to buy more and more, that's just great too. So Splendor, published by Space Cowboys. That's the one that kind of maybe put them on the map for me, or the other game they published, Time Stories.
I guess that one kind of.
So they've done some great stuff over the years, maybe less so in the recent years, but yeah, around Splendor time and after, other game like Elysium, which we played before.
Oh, yeah, we haven't played that.
Yeah, that's by Space Cowboys. So I think they've done quite a few games though, but Splendor is definitely a hit. It came out in 2014. And was a nominee for the Spiel des Jahres. And I think that was one of the years that was actually quite, is the word contentious? Or
there's a lot of competition, right?
Huh?
There's a lot of competition.
No. The word I'm thinking about is it's like very questionable.
Oh yeah, the contentious is good.
because I think that was the year that maybe Camel Up won instead of Splendor. And at the time, people were like, "No, Splendor should have won." I think that was something. It was something like that. But then,
Emerald's pretty
but then,
great though
at least
too.
on the Golden Geek side, Golden Geek Award, which is, if I didn't mention before, but it's basically the award that's nominated, awarded by the votes of the board game geek community. I think Splendor won 2014's Golden Geek Game of the Year and Best Family Game.
Nice.
So yeah, great game. And our first review on the channel, right?
Yeah, it was the first one, huh?
So my number 5, the game, I believe, John, I hope we still have 5 to go, so I hope he remembered this game. Because I think
I
it
hope
should
so
be,
too.
I
I
think
probably
it would
didn't.
be on your list.
I probably didn't.
Actually, would Estrella Drive had made your list, you think? Maybe not.
Nah, probably not.
Okay.
Unless we were considering older version games of Time Stories, it probably
Mhm.
wouldn't. Well, actually, no, it would have, because I'm pretty sure Simula would have lost to it. So, oh well, too
Okay,
late.
so I hope you remember this game. My number 5
I probably forgot.
of games I played in 2020, Atlantis.
Oh, that was this year. That was this last
Oh my
year.
gosh, you're terrible. You're
No, I
terrible.
thought it was 2019. End of 2019.
Played it in 2020.
Wait, what month? January?
Probably January or February.
Ah, that's why. It's too early in last year. So this doesn't count.
Because I'm pretty
Doesn't
sure
count.
those are the months I had in the beginning of the year. And then like maybe in April for some reason, and then like a huge gap. Anyway, so John's mistake, second mistake here.
Whatever. It's fine.
Atlantis Rising, and this is second edition, which actually looks very different from first edition. Gorgeous art by Vincent Dutray.
Mhm.
Right? It is, right? Yes. I was like, I hope I didn't say the wrong name. And published by Elf Creek Game, which have been, I think this was their first Kickstarter, and then they've been doing a few hits since then. Honey Buzz was the Kickstarter after, which has been getting some notice now. But Atlantis Rising Second Edition is the new edition that they made of Atlantis Rising, which was a co-op game of trying to escape Atlantis that was actually sinking. Interesting name, the rising part, right? Anyways, yeah, you're trying to cooperatively get out of Atlantis, and I guess the idea is you're also trying to like get other people out too, right? Other Atlanteans with you, trying to save your people while Atlantis is sinking. So this one was, I was excited when it was on Kickstarter because it looks so gorgeous, this new second edition. And but then actually getting to play it, because I think for Z Garcia from the Dice Tower, this was on his top list for a long time, like years ago. And so me being into co-op games, especially when I was first getting into the board game hobby, I was like, okay, another great co-op game. I have to try it sometime. Never got to try it for years and years until this second edition came out. And it's like, okay, I got to back it and try it, and played it with John. You remember what it was
I remember
like, though,
the
right?
game.
Okay.
I thought it was 2019, which is why I did not include it. I think that and the the other one, or like the Time Stories, I thought those are 2019. Because I think I was thinking it's like, oh, we played it during winter, right? Winter vacationing time. So I didn't think of January, February that much.
So, but playing it, then you do have some thoughts on it, right? I think it still kind of had a bit of that kind of action point feel of traditional co-ops, of course, since it actually technically is an older co-op. But it had a lot of interesting choices, right?
Yes.
Where it's like, where are you gonna? It's also worker placement, though, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It has kind of I guess the workers felt more like your action points, if you will.
Yeah. So the workers are kind of like action points, but I think the cool thing that they did was, I think in a lot of co-op games, what tends to happen is you tend to have what can happen, as we said multiple times before, is like alpha gamers will kind of dictate how people should go about playing. But in this game, because of the way that the resources worked, like you can't necessarily do that, right? You can't just like buy stuff for your other ally or just get things. Like you do have to coordinate together, and you have to make decisions about what you should or shouldn't be doing with your actions, because you're all, like, at least with the way that we were playing, like each player, or maybe it's second edition or maybe even the original had it, but like each player has unique skills or powers, and you guys will be needing to cover different things that are going on, right? And it doesn't necessarily be like, it's not necessarily one of those things where it's like someone can tell you like, oh, this is how you should do everything. Like you kind of have to make the decision, because in a sense, all of the actions are equally important and equally needed. And you can't really alpha game it because there's so many things going wrong that you need to get taken care of. So it kind of is up to each individual player to make the choice, which I think is a really great part.
Yeah, it was a great feel of like, we need collectively, we need these resources, but then we just have to trust each other to go get it.
Exactly.
And, take the risk that we're willing to take to do it.
And I think there were some like randomized events that could happen that could like, even after you've done your placement, things can happen that can change whether your placement action actually happened or didn't happen, right? Because there's like I think there's the wave tiles. So like the outer locations have like better resource gathering or something, but those are the ones that will sink first. So you could potentially lose your, if I remember correctly, it has been almost a year, or basically almost a year since we did play it. But like, I remember there were a lot of risks involved with selecting and choosing certain actions.
Yeah, and I think that is the part where it's like, helps with that alpha gaming, where it's like, each person has to take their own risks, right? And you can't even control that. So you kind of have to trust each other to do your part. And then the second edition's production though, of like the way the board fits together to form the Atlantis island, and then even like the devices you're building, like they slot into place on another board.
That was a good component.
That was good stuff.
And it looked good too, because it like the artwork fit like the machine that you're building.
Yeah, the big teleporter that you're gonna eventually use to escape and win the game. So Atlantis Rising, the second edition came out in 2019, and it was a nominee for the 2019 Golden Geek Best Co-op and Best Artwork, which I can see that.
Nice.
So that's my number 5, Atlantis Rising, second edition, and John's number 5.
Splendor.
Splendor.
On to number 4. And not Toy Story 4.
4.
So apparently that's where it's pictures from. Apparently, I have no idea. But
it looks in the style of it.
Yeah.
So number 4, starting with me. Oh man, my numbers are this is funny. Okay, my number 4 is 5 Tribes.
Dude, what is with this? 9, 8, 9, 4, 5. Gosh.
Oh, okay. So 5 Tribes by Days of Wonder came out. It's an older one, 2014 also. Man, 2014 sounded like a great year for board games.
I think that's why I think of it as like the classics time, but like Revolution.
So by Days of Wonder, which is a huge name in the industry, known for doing Ticket to Ride. That was like their huge one a long time ago. But then every year they have like one big release. And so 5 Tribes was the one in 2014, which is basically a kind of, you have a tile setup of your board that you're playing on to randomize every game. And then you have basically different meeples, different colored meeples on each tile, which represent the different tribes that you are all kind of basically manipulating to get the points that you want, to take ownership of the certain tiles you want, or get certain abilities that you want. But it's all kind of done. You're manipulating them, moving the meeples around in a Mancala system, which was very interesting. Like you're picking all the meeples up in one spot and then dropping them one on a tile at a time till you get to your destination. That's the tile you activate. And so this game was got a lot of attention back then. I think more so positive, but I know the one negative people always brought up is how prone to analysis paralysis. It is, meaning basically people taking too long to think through their moves, because there's so many options. Right? It's almost like all the same options of just which tile do I want to start on, and move that many meeple spaces away from to reach another tile I actually want to use. You can imagine, like, if you have a grid of like 5x5 tiles and the number of meeples are different on each tile, and that'll move you to a different tile if you start from there. There's a lot of options you could choose from. But I try to play it without having to do it that way. I don't know if John, have you played this?
Nope.
Yeah, I think the fear was you would take too long.
Maybe, probably.
But I mean, it's really colorful, so it has a nice look to it. And I think it has like a lot of different things going on. Like there's a bidding for turn order at the beginning of each round. So it's kind of like you're using points to see, if you want to go first. And obviously, if you're spending more points to go first that round, you're thinking that your move that you can do before someone else will get you more points back. There's like different abilities on tiles that you land on. Such as like certain ones will let you spend money to buy certain item cards, which then, it's a set collection portion of the game where if you get certain sets, those are worth more points at the end of the game. Each tribe, each color of meeple has its own abilities where some are worth points if you collect them. Some let you kill off other meeples. And so, yeah, there's just like all these different things that come together, and it sounds like a lot, but it works really well. There's also like these Jinn or genie cards you can get, basically where you're summoning these genies and they give you special abilities that are usually ongoing. And so, yeah, I like a lot of the things with it. And so getting to play it more in 2020, it kind of brought me back of like, yeah, not so worried about like the analysis paralysis, but just enjoying everything coming together in the game. And so, and Five Tribes was the winner of the Golden Geek Best Strategy Game. And so and also nominee that year for most innovative and game of the year and artwork. So this is one, yeah, John, you should try. I know you've gotten better at not taking a long time on turns.
I analyze pretty quickly. It's just whether I have to. Usually, the bigger issue is me weighing the merits of am I going to help my enemies out by doing this. That's
that is something in the game, right? Because where you move the meeples will then.
Exactly. That's the part where I will analysis paralysis myself. Oh, if I do 2 there, if they see it, then they're going to be able to do that there. But will that set me up so then I could do that there? Trying to think 6 moves ahead. Oh, chess. What have you done to me?
But yeah, it is a great game, and and it's designed by Bruno Catala, which I have to say because he's a huge name in the industry, and yeah, this is a great design by him.
Nice. All righty. My number 4 is Clank.
Good.
So, have we done a review of Clank? I think we did a review of Clank, but not Clank.
Yeah, Clank, but not in space.
Yeah, but basically, it's same concept of Clank. It's a deck building. I don't see what it says on the image itself. It's a deck building adventure in space. Right. But basically what you're doing is you're controlling a character who's basically trying to steal a treasure from the evil galactic emperor, whatever his name is. Eraticus, yeah, he replaces the dragon. So you're basically stealing a treasure from Eraticus. But the way that this game works is in typical Clank, or in normal Clank, there's kind of this upper level and lower level of the dungeon that you're exploring. And once you hit the lower level, that's where the dragon kind of is really there to attack you. But in this game, you're on a spaceship. So there's actually different sectors within the spaceship. And in order to get to the treasure section, you need to acquire, I think,
the key card.
No. Oh yeah, you need to acquire a key card, and you need, and once you grab a treasure, there are certain kind of shortcuts and pathways, like in a typical ship, that lock down. And so your movement becomes limited versus in the dragon, or like in the dungeon one, it's like the map kind of remains the same. So this one adds in that component. It definitely adds in a lot of variety with your characters. There's like factions. There's different equipments that can be activated. There's different resources that you can collect that are beyond the typical resources from the original game. It basically just adds a lot as a standalone expansion game, right? So this is a standalone. It is not, or I don't
Like
even
a
know if you
sequel.
call
It's
it
a
an
sequel game.
expansion. It's a sequel, yeah, because you can't combine it with the old game. It is its own kind of set. But it's really fun. I mean, personally, I've loved deck builder games, as Ben has alluded to. Deck building is one of my favorite genres, or what do you call it? Mechanics in games, in board games in general. But yeah, I think we've said if you've never played Clank before, never played deck builders, you definitely need to play it. And then if you liked that one, you have to play this one then, because this is just a better version of Clank, right? Overall, it's miles ahead of it. There's even different variations to the board. I think in the original game, there's like 2 sides, but in this game, there's each of the ship pieces can be flipped over. So you have variation even with the ship pieces. So you have, I think, 4 different ship pieces, and each of those are 2-sided. So you have effectively 8 different pieces that can be combined together, in groups of 3. So there's just a lot of stuff to this game that's super great. And Ben will now tell you all the details about this game.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I think the it wasn't, I don't think it's key card. Key card is one of the items that they add, but then you also have to like hack the system twice.
Yeah, you have to hack this. You have to hack like 3 terminals or something like that, and it allows you to then get into the board, because then you're basically like placing these cubes or something, something like that. But basically, you have to do things before you can get the treasure. Versus in the original game, you could pretty much just bum rush your way down to grab a treasure and then leave. So
and then the original was like fantasy humor,
fantasy themed.
This is like sci-fi humor.
Yeah,
making fun of a lot of sci-fi stuff you might know, Star Trek, Star Wars. That's all there is, right?
No, there's a lot of character cards that it's like, if you know those genres, like kind of the popular, characters. They have a lot of caricatures, or like you're like, okay, that's clearly calling that character out. I think there's like a princess, which is definitely off of Leia. There's some Star Trek characters that are throughout.
Some like G-Do apprentice, which is like the Jedi apprentice.
Yep. So tons of references.
Hover bike. So Clank in Space came out in 2017 by Renegade Games and Direwolf. And so Renegade is also one of those small studios that have gone on to do a lot of games, and a lot of games that have gotten a lot of attention. Clank was a big one though, and so Clank in Space has is even better. And I think the one honor I would point out is 2017 Golden Geek Best Card Game nominee. Interesting that.
What did it lose to?
Counted it as a card game though, since it's not all cards, but
it's a deck builder. It's primarily cards.
That's true. Right. So yeah, Clank in Space. John's number 4.
Numero 4.
I'm just thrown off because mine's 5 tries. Number 4.
Yes. Number 4. Because you messed it up
Clank
again.
In Space and 5 tribes.
So is your number 3 going to be number 2? two people? 2 things? 2 towers?
Between 2 cities.
There you go.
No, so going on to number 3. Okay, number 3.
My number 3 is Gloomhaven.
Wow, dang. Another huge game.
Yes, also a huge game. So I played this online, also on Tabletop Simulator. I played some of it solo. I played through 3 or 4 scenarios by myself solo in this game. And then I started a campaign with my brother. So basically what Gloomhaven is, it's a big game. Basically what it does is it emulates the D&D experience. You
like an RPG
play
into a board.
Like an RPG, Dungeons and Dragons experience, but more like a scenario based. So it's kind of a curated experience. But effectively what you are is you come into this town of Gloomhaven as a band of adventurers, either yourself, or if you're playing with a party, then a group of them. And effectively what you do is you go through a campaign booklet that comes with the box. And it has a set of a bunch of scenarios and campaigns that can happen. But the cool and interesting thing about this is it's a legacy game, where effectively things that you do the decisions you make within scenarios or the outcomes of what happens during scenarios determines how the story plays out for you. So if you play through this game, you are actually not going to see all the scenarios because there are certain decisions that you're going to make that will actually change the story, and it will lock you out of doing things because there's an example of maybe like you have to make a decision about whether you're going to, you know, arrest this person or let them go, let's say, right? And that decision does change the outcome of what scenarios you're allowed to do next, right? Where based on that decision that you make, it will unlock a new scenario location. But if you had chosen the other, you know, decision, it would unlock a different scenario to go to, and you're not allowed to kind of go back on that, theoretically, right? If you're playing through that way. So that's one of the really cool things. The other really cool thing is this is a game that, while it is scenario based, you don't actually have to play with the same people over and over, but you can continue the scenarios or the experience with different players over time. And you actually, there's a way that you can actually save your characters. So let's say I'm playing with my brother, and then I have another brother who's interested, or a friend who's interested. That friend or that person can join in your campaign, right? Because the town of Gloomhaven probably has adventurers that come in and out. And one of the unique things about the game is your levels kind of dictate how difficult the scenarios are, where it's not just based on kind of highest level party member and stuff, but it's an average between the levels of the players that are in the party. So if you have like a level 5 adventurer and a level 1 adventurer that are starting, then it averages to level 3, and then you go to the back of your scenario book to determine the strength of your adversaries based on that average party level. So it actually kind of collates, it kind of helps bring a balance to, like, if you have somebody who's new or your character dies, because your characters can actually die in this game. So if your character dies and you have to restart like a new party member, a new character, like if you need to continue from the scenario you were at, normally if it was based on levels, then it's like you would have been screwed. You wouldn't have been able to finish that scenario. But this game actually has a lot of that incorporated throughout, where you actually get new characters and new classes of people you can play as in the game as you progress through the storylines, and you unlock new skills, you unlock new abilities, you unlock new equipment, you unlock all kinds of really cool things. So it's this amazing experience. But as mentioned, it is a lot of stuff to keep track of. So if you're not experienced with playing games in general, I would not recommend this as a first-time experience to try to get into board games. But it really is a very, very well thought out, well created system, right, of a game. So
yeah, and people,
I actually recommend playing it online because you can do save states and you don't have to worry about components. Because I've heard when people play this game, and I think a similar experience with Kingdom Death is what typically happens when people actually play through these games is they leave their board set up in a particular space because it just takes so dang long to get everything set up and put out together and to keep track of what's going on. So I think actually this is ironically better on Tabletop Simulator, mainly because it's just easier to manage everything that's happening versus if you try to do this in person, the ideal would be actually needing to set space aside to keep going through this. If you really want to like do it quickly, right? Or like regularly, right?
And yeah, and as you mentioned, like if you're not experienced with like RPGs or heavy board games, yeah, not to start with this one. But what the same company, same designer did publish is this game, Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, which seems to be getting attention this past year because it's the smaller, streamlined version of Gloomhaven. It's still probably like a medium heavy game, but more condensed, so it's not so much to take out and set up. And so that is the one that people do. I've heard a lot of channels recommend that if this experience you want to try, and you know you have people who are willing to learn it, or maybe one person who is more experienced with like leading a board game or teaching a game that has all these things going on, then yeah, Jaws of the Lion is maybe what you want to start with. which is available at Target, actually. So widely available. Where then Gloomhaven itself, the one that John's showing, is probably as big as this whole stack of games here. It's a big box. It's a big
Yep.
box
Yep.
compared to then Jaws
That
of
one
Lion,
sitting right
like
there.
that. So, but yeah, Gloomhaven is by Cephalofair Games, and Isaac Childress is a designer, and that's kind of his main claim to fame. He's done Gloomhaven, which is like its own world, which is something that people really like too. That it's fantasy, but it's his own made up fantasy. Like you don't come across races like elves or orcs, all those traditional ones. Like he made up his own races for this world.
There's like a plant, or not a plant person, like an earth person. There's like this, like it's like a pseudo gnome, but kind of mixed with goblin, but not really. Then there's like these elf-like things, but they're more barbaric, right? Like it seems like they're a hybrid of like wolf people and elves together. So it's like it's none of the typical. It's not none of the Tolkien, right? Tolkien fantasy style. It's its own unique universe, but also fantasy, right? Like or like the high fantasy sense.
And so, yeah, as this design by Isaac Childress really got him on the map, even though he's only released a couple games within all these years. Gloomhaven came out, I think, in 2017, technically. And so it actually was on Kickstarter first. And then that raised like under 400,000. Yeah, chump change. And then, but then when he did a second printing of Gloomhaven on Kickstarter, like I think that's after Gloomhaven already, the first one came out and maybe like reviewers got to try it and really made a lot of buzz about it. The second campaign got $4 million.
Yeah.
And then
No,
the most recent one he did, I think maybe last year or 2019, was a Kickstarter for basically a sequel game called Frosthaven.
Mhm.
And that got almost $13 million.
Hey, he didn't add a zero behind that number this time, so not as good as the last time. He didn't
So
increase
the
it by
game
100% or 10%.
has gotten a lot of attention in the board gaming world. And those are actually basically the only games he's made, but they're huge successes for him. And so, yeah, Gloomhaven. And then on Board Game Geek, uh, the honors, at least the Golden Geek honors in 2017.
Mhm.
It got the 2017 Golden Geek. It was the winner for most innovative, game of the year, best thematic game, best strategy game, best solo game, best co-op game.
It won all of those?
Yeah.
Wow. I thought you were going to say longest game for hardcore gamers to play.
I mean, so those Golden Geek Awards are like voted on by the Board Game Geek community, right? So that's saying a lot that it got all of those in that year.
Sucks if you released a game in 2017.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So that is very impressive. Yeah, to get all of those. And then obviously no Spiel des Jahres because it's a really heavy game.
It's way too
Spiel des
heavy
Jahres
for
is
that.
for family weight games, so
Yeah.
so understandable. So my number 3. Let me get it. Is Marvel Champions.
Oh snap! We played that in 2020 also.
Well, we might have played it earlier. Did we?
I think we played it before the
Before it all?
pandemic hit,
Okay.
so. Snap! That's
I
3
don't
games
remember
I
when I
forgot I
got it.
played.
Yeah, I remember playing it. I remember even playing it solo though. And actually, I probably played it solo first to learn it. And
Yeah,
then,
you played it solo, then we played together, and then you probably played solo again after.
and so the game is not that heavy. It's just this size, but all my cards are sleeved, which adds a lot of weight. So, but Marvel Champions is a cooperative living card game published by Fantasy Flight, which we also mentioned published Twilight Imperium. And so this is in their line of LCGs or living card games, which is basically like a marketing model where, you know, they release packs that you can just buy and add to the game, like basically mini expansion packs. They aren't like randomized booster cards. So you just buy the one, and then you have whatever is added to the game. And the way they're doing it is basically for this game, it's a cooperative one where you, with the cards you have, you get to kind of somewhat customize your Marvel hero to have their own deck, to have their own special, their own character cards, plus like some kind of aspect like defensive or aggressive, and you'll have those cards in their deck. And then you fight against the villain. And so those are the expansion packs that they release. They release new hero packs or villain packs to give more variety to how you can mix and match it when you're playing. And yeah, I was excited for it because I've been interested in their LCGs a lot over the years. Because even though I can name a lot of LCGs, like an important thing to know is they all play differently. It's just kind of the, I don't know, the branding they use for games that are marketed that way, but that doesn't mean they're like in the same game system at all. And so this one being a cooperative one has gotten a lot more success because I think the competitive LCGs run into issues where, you know, balancing cards and stuff over time in a competitive game. But as a co-op one, it could be a little simpler because you're just trying to make sure the players are enjoying it in, you know, however difficult they want to make it for themselves. And yeah, the Marvel theme is great. It has great art because I know a lot of Marvel games, you know, trying to cash in on the Marvel fame. They, you know, they kind of use whatever Marvel art. And I'm, you know, I'm kind of particular when it comes to how certain games look, certain themes look. And but the art in this one is great. Not just like clips from the Marvel movies or something like that. That'd be so ugly. But then it has like, you know, great mechanism of like, for your hero, you're playing as that character, and your hero card has its hero side and its alter ego side, and so you kind of have to choose which side to be on each turn, and that'll kind of affect how the villain does their turn. But then also the interesting mechanism of, you know, you have your hand of cards that you draw from your deck, but then the costs for the cards are basically using other cards. So you have to kind of choose like, ooh, if I really want to play this, I have to spend the other cards in my hand as the cost. And so there's kind of planning you have to do, and it's cooperative. So yeah, you are kind of talking out like, oh, should I do this now? Can you actually support me with your card next turn?
I'll support you.
And so yeah, it works great. I love the like new characters they're adding, whether it's like the ones that are still coming out, maybe at the beginning of this year, like Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, to then even some of the earlier ones that were cool, like seeing Black Panther in the card game and how he feels different from say Iron Man. And then, you know, villains like Kang the Conqueror, which I still want to get just for the name. And
Kang the Conqueror.
Yeah. Shout outs to our friend, brother Andy Kang. Kang the Conqueror. So yeah, Marvel Champion. It plays well. And I do actually have one of the first big box expansion, Rise of Red Skull, which then adds
that looks like betrayal.
Which then adds, you know, Red Skull as a villain, who then, you know, all the villains have their own way of playing and scheming or attacking. But it also adds like Spider-Woman and Hawkeye, which are also cool from videos I've seen. I haven't actually played with these yet. But yeah, a lot of stuff that can be expanded on this game. And it was good enough that I played it solo. I think that's kind of the main thing. Like, I was willing to set up the game and play by myself because I found it that interesting. Nice. And, you know, that engaging to try to figure out and get into the theme of being a superhero. So yes, my number 3, Marvel Champions, a card game, came out in 2019, and Golden Geek nominee for Game of the Year, most thematic, best co-op, best card game, best solo. Just a lot of nominees for those. So yes, my number 3, Marvel Champions, and John's Gloomhaven.
Forgotten game. Cool.
So going on.
What?
Going on, right? Almost at the end. Number 2.
I'm blending in with the background.
Number 2. So with me, right? My number 2. No accolades that I saw, surprisingly. But number
I give
two
it
to
accolades.
me, game that I played in 2020.
Bravo.
Power Ranger.
Oh, that's why it doesn't have accolades.
Because it's too popular, John.
Sure. Well, I did just see something about a new comic artwork, a hardcover or something coming out for Power Rangers.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid, my number two. This is not a joke, people. This is a real game, big box, mostly because it's a lot of miniatures that take up a lot of space. But it's not like an actual heavy game with a lot of miniatures. But did we play this year?
Yep, we have played it.
And it was hard.
Yeah. Well, we lost because of a turn that literally we could do nothing about. We literally just lost. And it was like, oh, I guess the game is over.
Yeah, so for these top games, I was thinking a little bit like, between Marvel Champions and Power Rangers, like which one would I want to play more? And I think I ultimately lean towards Power Rangers because of basically how it's kind of more thematic, because I think not a huge diss at Marvel Champions, but that it is a card game, so it can feel like a card game most of the time, right? Where then in Power Rangers, you have cards, you have dice, you have the miniatures, so some movement on a board. So I just found that more engaging, something I would want to go back to more often. But what I did enjoy about it is partly the nostalgia. I wouldn't say that's the biggest part. That is
totally
a big
the biggest
part.
It's a huge
but
part.
Not the biggest part. Because I think when they launched this game, I think it started as a Kickstarter, and I had kind of like stayed up with some Power Rangers things like over the most recent years, like kind of catching up, since obviously not watching it since I was a kid. And I was like, oh, there's this whole universe of Power Rangers stuff that I found interesting that they continued. But then to have this board game version where it's a simple board where it's just certain locations in the Power Rangers world that you can move to fight the putties and the enemies and the boss. The bosses that show up there. If any of you guys don't understand what I'm saying or what John just did, that's hilarious.
Go watch the first 2 episodes of the Power Rangers and you'll totally understand.
But I think there's some really interesting like mechanics in this version of it, right? Again, it's not that heavy of a game, but there's just interesting stuff where like, you choose a ranger and you just have a deck of 10 cards, and that's like their personalized deck, and you're drawing from that, choosing to play cards during fights. But then when you run out of cards, that's when you actually get knocked out. So you need to be aware of how soon you're using your cards. So that's like a interesting kind of planning that you have to do. And then there's also the combat itself, where it's kind of, you flip cards for each miniature enemy in the location, but you place it out in like a row so that there is a certain kind of turn sequence to it and order that you might want to fight them in, which is also interesting. And then obviously the thematic stuff of like, when you defeat enemies, you gradually unlock your Zords, that give you more abilities. And then also how the cards combo with each other, right? Each ranger, you can kind of notice a certain way that their cards play. Like some might be, using the dice more, or some might be sacrificing some card to roll more dice during an attack. They have their own kind of slight differences, but then you can kind of plan with each other on like who should go attacking, or I can back you up with this card on this turn, so yeah, a lot of interesting things with a game that doesn't have all those small details of like a board with a ton of spaces to choose where to go, or a whole deck of cards that you can play cards from. You just have your 10 cards, so yeah, I enjoyed it. This is another game I did play solo quite a few times, and I don't know if I ever won. I might have, probably not though. Which is surprising because like I mentioned to John before, in like the videos that Renegade Games puts up, the publishers of the game, they have a lot of videos of the designer playing the game. And I don't know if I've watched through all of them to see like if he actually wins, but he always sounds like they're doing well. And I'm always then wondering like, how are you doing well at the game? Like, I'm pretty sure I'm reading the rules right. There aren't that many pages to the rules. So it's just like, why is it so hard for me? So
Should
But
I
that
comment
challenge
on
is
that? No, I'm just kidding.
right. I mean, that challenge is part of the appeal too, right? Like how to learn to win a game, basically,
Nice.
which keeps me engaged. So yes, my number 2, Power Rangers, Heroes of the Grid.
Dun, dun, dun. Wait, no. I was about to do
Dun,
Dragon Ball
dun,
Z.
dun, 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 dun.
Yeah. I was about to do the Dragon Ball Z theme song.
Wow, get out of here. Get out of this video. Yeah. And I just
Power
want to say
Ranger.
I have basically backed all the expansions for this game. So almost not everything, but the main expansions. So there's like a lot more Rangers that you get. And so you can choose who you want to play, different Zords with them, new bosses and enemies. So a lot of stuff you can mix up from the series.
And he said it's not the nostalgia factor. All good. It was fun. It was fun. We need to give it more than one try. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
I thought we were doing pretty
win.
well, and then we literally just lost in literally like in between our turns. We didn't even have a choice. Like we were
Wait,
fine.
what happened?
And then it was just the spawns. It just spawned all of the putties to the point where we just lost because we ran out of miniatures and you lose. So it was just like the sequence of events was just like we couldn't have anticipated it. We couldn't do anything about it. It wasn't set up to do that really, or it didn't look like it was. Maybe if we knew the cards better, but like, yeah. So we're just like, oh, I guess we just lost.
I mean, in that way, it is kind of like I think that might be part of why it sits well with me. Of like, it's a co-op game that has that chance to it, you know.
Yeah.
So it's co-op, so you like do as much planning as you can, but there's always that chance of how things can turn out, which I like.
And I honestly do think it was just a series of just unfortunate cards that happened to come up. It was just like, oh, well, meh, all right, on to the next round kind of thing. So, good. Which usually I have mixed feelings about that, but it played out all right in this game, in this version. Because we still weren't doing like super well. It wasn't like it was so easy and then all of a sudden we just lost. And it was like, why?
Yeah, I mean, there is the dice rolling in this that makes quite a big difference, right?
Yeah.
And so that could mess you up.
True. But it's not too bad. You can mitigate that stuff. But anyway, my number 2 game we have talked about, we have done a review of this game, is Viticulture.
Viticulture! I knew it! It had to be on your list.
Yep, Essential Edition specifically, because apparently regular Viticulture without Essential Edition is not good. Well, at least it's missing things that I think I noted a lot of the positives, and I think when we did the review, you're like, actually, that's the Essential Edition stuff, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, the Essential Edition is great. But yeah, you can watch our review about it. But basically, it is, I know the symbol here, Stonemaier Games.
Good.
But basically, I don't know the year it came out, but it is viticulture is what you're doing. You're growing grapes to make wine, and you are selling wine to people. That is literally this whole game. All of you are doing. But it's great because it's a worker placement game, and it is a full-on worker placement because based on the way that you place your worker determines actions that you take in the course of the game. The Essential Edition is separated between 2 seasons, the summer and the winter season. And then there is a spring and a fall season of activities that happen, but they're not on the board specific. But basically what you do during your turn is you place your workers. You have a limited amount of workers and you can place them on these different spaces, and you have to choose when you're using them because there are certain actions that are only open during the summer and certain actions that are only open during the winter. Summer typically is growing grapes, building things, kind of accruing stuff. Winter is usually like making wines, selling wines, fulfilling orders, I believe is what it's officially called, and then visitor cards of the different types of people that would be visiting your viticulture location,
Your vineyard.
Your vineyards, there you go, that's the right word. But yeah, it's great because there's a main board that you are putting a lot of the workers on, but you also have your own personal player board because that's where you actually hold the grapes and you're growing the grapes and making the wines in, and you have to unlock different pieces of your vineyard. You have to unlock your cellars. You have to get certain types of irrigation systems in place so you can grow different types of grapes if you're looking to do that. There's ways to accumulate points there. So it is a thinky game, but it also is kind of at a good pace, right? Because every round as you're playing through, you're getting to place the workers yourself. So while other people are kind of thinking of where they want to place their workers, you can also think about it yourself, and it can lock you out of doing certain things. But I think just by the nature of the theme of the game, it's very slow. It feels kind of slow, and it kind of is that sense of like your every round is a year, is kind of thematically what's happening. So it already is kind of setting you up with this concept of like it's going to take time to play through this game, which I think actually kind of feeds into it in a positive way, versus I think we've talked about analysis paralysis, or kind of like this, alpha gamers overthinking their turns and stuff like that. But this game kind of lends you this kind of like chill mode of playing this game, even though you're competing, right? Ultimately, you're still competing to try to get the most points, but it just has this really great feel. So I got to play this again recently with my fiance as well. We did some 2-player games. I won the first game when I was teaching her, and then she won the second game. So it's pretty cool. So it's a great game. And there's lots of different options, I think, is the other fun thing too. I think a lot of point collection games, there tends to always be like only 1 or 2 strategy, or like typically there's certain strategies that are most effective that usually are the ones that people will go for just because it's the best. But this game really has a lot of varied options on how you want to kind of encourage the growth of your vineyard and your popularity as the best viticulturalist in the area. So yes.
Yeah, I mean, what you said earlier about how it has that chill feel, even though you're competing, like that's exactly what I was thinking too. It just, I think big part of it might be because of the theme, but yeah, it does kind of, set you up to kind of enjoy the ride of like, yeah, we're just gonna take these steps to do this, but we are competing. But I just know I need to go this way and do that, and you're doing that, and yeah, oh, viticulture.
So good.
And also by Stonemaier Games, as you remember, that's a company
I think it's one of the only ones I actually know regularly now.
And the designer Jamie Stegmaier and other names listed there that I don't know, but Jamie Stegmaier is like the head and owner of Stonemaier Games, so he's kind of the main guy behind a lot of their games. But yeah, it came out in 2015. Essential Edition came out in 2015. Which was a couple years after the first edition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there is the Tuscany expansion that I do have. I just haven't played it yet. Mm-hmm. I've heard it just extends the game in general, so I don't know if I can get people to play that one yet. But it actually separates the seasons, so now you have 4 seasons, which I think is crazy and cool. But anyway.
So your number 2 Viticulture Essential Editions, mine Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid. And now we are
better
here.
Now, huh? No, just kidding. Wait, what? I said, whose list is better now?
Power Rangers. No, Power Rangers doesn't.
Wine making. I'll get you drunk.
Doesn't beat viticulture.
And now, the moment you've been waiting for.
Number 1,
the champions of last year's games that we played.
Not
necessarily best game
last year. So what was your number 1 game that you played last year, John?
So my number 1 game is a game that I've been ranting and raving to Ben about that he still doesn't want to play, and has steadily climbed in the ranks of Board Game Geek that he's always been hesitant about, but I am still pushing him to play, which is Spirit Island.
I know. I was right when you're describing it. I was like, okay. Okay.
So Spirit Island is a cooperative board game where it's a lot of people describe it as reverse settlers, basically, or reverse colonialism, which it is. Basically what it is you play as one of the spirit guardians of an island that the European explorers are coming in to settle and try to take over, kill the natives off, and pollute. So you play as one of the spirit deities that is basically trying to terrorize and force the European explorers out of your island. So that is the theme of the game. So basically the way that it works is it's a cooperative game. So you're working with the other spirits, and the way that it works is each of the spirits are unique and special, right? They all have different skills and abilities and powers. And what you're trying to do is raise the terror level of the island to a point where it basically becomes such a terrifying island that the explorers are, driven off. So either it's actually two victory conditions. Sorry, it's either the terror level is at the top where you kind of effectively isolate and remove it, or you just do a complete board wipe of all settlers off of the board, right? Which is partially a winning condition, and increasing the terror levels changes what types of explorers need to be removed off of the map. It is an amazing game. This is a game I actually have played solo a number of times by myself, playing through different circumstances and scenarios with the different spirits. And basically what you're doing is working together with the other spirits in trying to drive them off. The cool thing about it is that each of the spirits interact with the space and the world in very different ways, right? So the way that your spirits activate is based on these little circle tokens. I think they're called totems officially. They're not really thematically looking. It's just these little discs. But basically, it's the presence that you have, whether it's a weak presence in a particular tile location or a strong presence. And based on the presence that you have in certain areas, allows you to interact with your god spirit powers that will affect certain ranges from those presences you might have on the board. And that's the way in which you're trying to affect the settlers. And the way that you affect settlers is very different between the spirits too, because some of the spirits is outright destruction, right? Some of them, like the phoenix or the river spirit or the ocean spirit, like they tend to be like direct, just like killing off of these explorers. And by killing off certain types of explorers, right, or cities or settlements that they have, it will increase the terror based on what you do. But then there's other deities like this guy, I forget what his name is, and I'm not picking his nose, but this guy, his thing is, I think he's the one where he actually can't kill explorers. Like he literally cannot kill the explorers on the board, but everything he does to interact with them increases the terror level of the location. So it's just a kind of pushing that kind of like, I'm not going to get rid of you because, that's not my thing, but I'm going to make your life miserable because it's going to be a nightmare being on this island, right? So thematically, like he cannot kill units. Like it actually says it on his board. His power is you are not allowed, like if you have any powers that kill, you do not kill, right? You cannot kill, right? So every spirit, every one of these is unique. And then of course, over the course of the game, you can gain different types of powers over time. And even every player board, the way that you are able to increase your presence or do movements or do things is different between each of the spirits as well. Where certain spirits, they have faster movement, so they can get around and put their presence on the board quicker, right? Like the fire guy, he can spread really quickly. But then you have ones like the ocean, where he's locked in the ocean. He can't put presence outside of the ocean tiles and the next closest like shore tiles. That's it. He can't get further into the inlands. So if you need, and this is where the unique mechanics of working with the different players comes into this game, where each spirit is specialized and unique in dealing with certain circumstances. And it's very important that you work together, because in this game, you really can't alpha gamer this, because only you know the powers that you can do or not do, and your presence is determined by where you place these things, right? So you really have to work with the other players and hope that they can do the things. And the best you can do is like, I can't deal with this thing over here. I hope you can deal with this. And you kind of have to go about doing your thing. And you can try to coordinate, but like, it's just such a good game. So Ben needs to play it. So the funny thing actually was, it was, I think when it first came out, it was actually ranked pretty low on Board Game Geek when it first came out.
And
but I think this is one of those games.
It came out in 2017.
In 2017. And I think it's one of those games that it's like, I think it's just that, 2017, there was Gloomhaven that came out, and probably a lot of other games that came out that like, I think way overshadowed this game. But in recent time, as we've looked at Board Game Geek, it's like every time we've really looked at it, this game has moved up in the rankings to now where it's in the top, I think it's in the top 50, definitely the top 50.
Yeah.
It might have even been broaching the top 20 or close to it.
Right now it's number 13.
Number 13. See? And it's been increasing in ranking as time has gone along, which is really, I think, not common in a lot of board games. Like, you don't see a game that was older or released in the past, and once it's kind of generally established initially, right, by these ratings, usually they don't climb up like this. But this game has, and it is amazing. And Ben is missing out, and he loves co-op games, and I just don't understand why he hasn't wanted to play this.
I mean, it's no number 12 overall. No, I'm just kidding.
True.
I'm
It'll
just
get
kidding.
there.
You know what? You've probably spoken the most about this of all the games on your list. Like, you gave the most details of how it plays
Oh man, this
compared
game
to
is so
the
good.
other 9 games you've mentioned on your
Ugh.
list. So you seem very interested, very
That's why it's
into
number
it.
one.
Yeah.
Number one.
And so, yeah, and I mentioned it came out, according to Board Game Geek, 2017. I felt like it was older, um, but then, yeah, 2017 Golden Geek, a lot of nominations, obviously because Gloomhaven won a lot of those that
This is
year.
the same spirit, right? Cooperative, working together, all that stuff. It has scenarios. It has a ton of scenarios, and the scenarios are also difficulty locked. So you can actually edit the difficulty of how difficult you want this game to be as you play it. So that's another really cool thing about this game. Anyway, sorry.
But yeah, no, I was gonna say 2017 Golden Geek nominee, most innovative, best thematic, strategy, solo, co-op, artwork, and game of the year.
It's literally all of the stuff that Gloomhaven won.
Yeah, you know, I'm just gonna play Gloomhaven instead.
I love both games.
But this one more, apparently.
This one more. It's easier to get into.
It is.
That's why I like this one more.
I
will say that the solo experience is a lot harder to play, because if you really want a good solo experience, you need to play 2 spirits.
Mhm.
But keeping track of 2 different spirits at once is really hard.
Mm.
So while you can play this game solo, it's not recommended. It really is a better experience playing with other people in this game. It's the best.
I will think about it.
I've got a tabletop simulator. I have it sitting over there. Anytime. Anyway, that's my number 1.
Spirit Island. So my number 1, you know, I don't need it. I'm not gonna say that much about my number. You said so much about yours. I have nothing to say about mine. My number 1 game played in 2020, Root.
No, you played it without me. I'm so mad. I wanted to play it for so long.
John wishes he played it.
I've been wanting to play it for so long, and he played it without me.
So John wishes he played Root in 2020.
That would have been in my top 10, 100% for sure.
So Root is published by Leader Games, and it got a lot of attention. It came out in, let me see, in 2018, according to Board Game Geek, which sounds about right. It got a lot of attention because it was their kind of second attempt at making a competitive asymmetric game. And if you're curious about what that means, you can watch our video, IGBG Explains Asymmetrical Games, however we called it.
Asymmetric, I think.
But in general, the idea is that you choose one faction to play as, and every player plays differently. They have their own actions, limitations, rules that they have to follow, but it all works together in this same game where they're trying to conquer the forest, basically. And it has this really cute artwork, but it is definitely a cutthroat game. You are competing and trying to undermine each other and make alliances, break alliances to get ahead. And a lot of strategy in it. The different factions, play pretty differently. They all use like cards and, you know, pieces, meeples on the board to represent their warriors and stuff. But their own player boards have the kind of details of how they play differently, where, you know, if it's like, it could be the Marquis de Cat, which is kind of the basic one, the first one that you learn, where you're already kind of conquered the forests and you have warriors out in different clearings or areas, and you're kind of trying to just wipe out the rest of the people. while you're building your structures throughout the forest. Where then there's the Airy Dynasty, which I've probably played the most, but I also kind of enjoy the most, where they're like the noble birds who were kind of kicked out and now they're coming back to reclaim the forest. And but their play style is they have on their player board they have a decree line where they have to play a card one or two cards every turn, which then increases the number of actions they do during their action phase. And but then the special rule is that depending on however many cards you add to each section, it indicates that you actually have to do that many of that specific action. Like if you have 2 cards on the move column, that means on your action phase you have to move 2 times. And specifically the cards will indicate which spots on the board, like what kinds of spots, because the spots have different suits assigned to them, basically like a fox suit or a mouse suit. And so then the cards you put there into the move column might say you have to move 2 times from a mouse spot or a mouse clearing. And so you have to be able to do that on your turn, or if you can't follow all of the actions you have in your decree, you fall into turmoil and your your dynasty kind of topples momentarily and you lose points and you have to start over and rebuild. And so it's just interesting just how it all is very much feels asymmetric. It may not look like it because it's mostly cards and the pieces, but it definitely plays like one with the different rules for each faction, to even the vagabond who is just a lone creature, in this case a raccoon. And everyone else has a faction with lots of pieces, but you are just this raccoon moving around in the forest in between spaces and then trying to craft items and trade it to the other factions to build relationships, basically.
But
And so
still
yeah,
trying
it's
to
just so
win in the
interesting how
end.
it's all different. Sorry, what?
Still trying to win in the end.
Yeah. And so it's just so interesting how they all play differently. You have to think differently with them, and yet it still comes together in one game where you're competing. And yeah, that's kind of mainly why the game got so much buzz when it came out. It was their, like I mentioned, leader game's second attempt at an asymmetric game, and they did it really well with Root. And I even have the expansions, both, which add even more factions.
And the game that came out before it.
And Vast, it was their first attempt, which was, I don't think from reviews it was bad, but then I don't think I got to try it. But then Root came out and I tried that, and that's already great. So I don't know if I'll go back to Vast. But yeah, so Root got to play with my cousins, especially one who was actually asking for it a lot. And I was kind of surprised because it is kind of heavier to teach, at least from my view of like, because you have to teach each faction.
Multiple rules, yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of, in a sense, like compounding on how long it is to teach. But he was interested. And even when teaching, he was engaged. And then when we played, he did find it engaging. And so yeah, that worked out great, getting to play with someone who actually really wanted to try it too. And so yes, my number 1 game played in 2020, Root, which, let me see, it was the 2018 Golden Geek winner of the most innovative thematic and game and best artwork and game of the year. So yeah, we did really well when it came out.
Nice.
So yes, our number 1s, Spirit Island and Root. And so that is our top 10 games played in 2020. So if you guys found any of these interesting, there are certain videos we've done reviews for these. So you can check out the rest of our channel to find reviews of games we have already reviewed. Aside from our top 10, I did want to mention, and we did talk about this before, I did want to mention my honorable mention at this point, basically my number 11 on my list, just because it was consistently at 11 when I made the list a couple times, is The Search for Planet X by Renegade Games and Foxtrot Games, which is a deduction game where you're all competing to basically chart the night sky and locate where asteroids, comets are, and ultimately find the elusive Planet X. And it's interesting because it gives you like this each player like a pretty big sheet to write on, to take notes on, where you can write down like for that game how are the comets and asteroids related to each other in their positioning around the sky, to then even crossing off what you know for each sector of the sky, like, you know, there's no asteroids here, no comet in this one. And so you're gradually deducing where all these things are in the sky, where then you're also setting up the game using an app which then randomly generates these rules each time. And so I'm not usually one for app games, and so maybe that's why it didn't make it too high on my list. But the app did work well. Like, I played it once with my relatives, and it was surprising how well the app worked, because it seemed like the app didn't need to be connected online to each other. It was just, you start the game, someone else can use their own phone to type in the code, and then they'll basically have the same game generated for them. So they'll have the same information available to them. And so that worked out very well. And it looks gorgeous. Like, I mean, yeah, the artwork on this, that's so nice for a realistic space themed game.
Nice.
So yeah, that, I just wanted to mention that in case you guys were interested, because that's actually technically a 2020 game also. So you might hear more about it moving forward from other board game channels, since it is such a new game.
Nice.
But then,
Yeah, and
John,
for me, I actually had a little bit different, because mine was not necessarily or mine wasn't like my 11th honorable mention. As I mentioned before, with quarantine, it's been difficult having the space or the opportunity to play board games. More for me, it would be a list of, if I had a choice. Obviously, I had forgotten a lot of them, so maybe this is even a little bit off now. But if I had a choice of games that I would have wanted to play in 2020, or what I'm hoping to play in 2021, Root was on there, as you kind of saw how much I was like, why would you play without me? You monster, you. But there are a couple other games that I was thinking about that I wanted to play. So one of them is actually sitting on Ben's shelf over there. It's 3 boxes that looks very similar to each other. It's the West Kingdoms. No, not Rising Sun. The West Kingdom series. So we've actually played Architects of the West Kingdom in the past, but there's 2 other games that have come out, Paladins, and it says, I think the official term is Viscount, but we say Viscounts of the West Kingdom. But that is a series of games. I want to replay Architects again, because we only played it like once, and it was a really fun experience from what I recall. And then, of course, the 2 that come after that that are part of the same world or universe, but they have different mechanics for each of the board games. So they play differently, though they are connected in a sense by, you know, the theme or like the world of the game itself. So that Rising Sun is one I do want to play again. I didn't get to play a lot of it back then. And then, of course, Root. And then another one that we just did the review of is Wingspan. That would have been a fun one to kind of get back into and play again. So yeah.
Yeah, of games that we would want to play. Like I had mentioned to John before this, that there were certain games I was surprised, like when looking at my logged plays of 2020, that there were certain games that I didn't play in 2020. Like, I think Wingspan might be one of them. And I was like, really? I didn't play at all the whole year? That was really surprising. But yeah, Wingspan is definitely one I would want to return to, especially after I posted the picture of the second expansion that I actually have now. And so to try that out would be cool. Another game I would want to play, hopefully this year sometime. We're at the start of the year, so there's still hope. Is Clank Legacy. Legacy games. I mean, that one's like fresh, right? That was John and I were gonna play that one, right? At some point.
Yeah, we were planning on it actually. I think right before the pandemic started, or like when the quarantining started. I think we were planning on like getting a Legacy started, because the last full one we played was season 1 pandemic.
Yeah. So it's been a while since not playing a Legacy game, and that one is obviously deck building. So John will like that.
Make the best deck.
And then I was excited for being able to try Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, because even though I sound like maybe I knew some things about Gloomhaven when John was sharing about it, I haven't played it. And so I was excited to get a good deal on Jaws of the Lion a while back, but I haven't been able to play it yet. I could still play it, but I'm a little well, I kind of don't want to waste it on just me, especially if it's a game that you're unlocking things, kind of legacy game like. I'd rather go through that with someone. So
that's why the online version is superior. You can have multiple save states of different campaigns at once.
There's no save state in life, John.
I'll just donate to support. Donations to support. That's you really love a game, you need to support your developers.
Yes, true. So yeah, those are a couple of games that I would look forward to playing, hopefully sometime this year. And so with that, I think the last thing I want to do is I want to give a shout out to our friend Robert. This is for you, Robert.
You better watch this whole thing.
Yeah, just to
if you skipped any of it, I'm calling you out right now. I know your contact information.
No, shout out to Robert for asking both of us, right, separately, if we're going to be doing a top 10 list like this. And so kind of either giving us an idea or just pushing us to finally do our first top 10. So thank you. Hope you enjoyed this, Robert. And obviously hope all of you who are watching it enjoyed it. If you found it useful or helpful, hope you'll share this with your friends, family, people you play board games with. Hope you'll consider subscribing on YouTube, following our new Instagram. And yeah, thank you for watching. Until next time, we will see you then. Bye.